Hello everyone, it's me Uncle John. Today I am going to read chapter 5, The Siege of Fort William Henry. General Monroe welcomed Cora, Ellis, and Hayward to Fort William Henry. Hawkeye and the Mohicans left at once on other business. The fort was surrounded by the French and the Huron. They attacked day and night with big guns. Still, there was no word of the reinforcement promised by Webb. But under Monroe's command, with Hayward as the second in command, the British soldiers were unafraid. The French siege of William Henry went on for 5 days. On the fifth day, both commanders called a truce, and the fighting stopped for a while. During this time, Hayward took a walk along the highest slope where the British guns stood outside the fort walls. He was surprised to see a French soldier walking along the path that led from Montcalm's camp to the fort. The man had a prisoner with him, and Hayward saw that it was Hawkeye. His face was grim, his wrists were tied behind his back. He had no rifle. Hayward turned and made his way to Monroe's room at Fort William Henry. He thought that French had caught Hawkeye returning to the fort and wondered why he had returned so soon. Perhaps Monroe would know. On his way, he met Cora and Ellis, who made fun of him for not spending much time with them. I'm sorry, he smiled. Do your father's business as a soldier should. You can't think badly of me for that. Of course not, Duncan, said Alice. In fact, my sister and I are very grateful to you for bringing us here, aren't we, Cora? Oh, replied Cora sadly, but what will happen now? These are hard times for our father. How will this siege end? In victory for the British, I hope, replied Hayward, and he kissed Alice's hand and then hurried on to Monroe's room. Hayward, said Monroe, opening his door, I wanted to talk to you about the message from the French, sir. Yes, but let the Frenchman wait a little. Is it true that you are in love with one of my daughters? Yes, answered Hayward, but I haven't told Alice yet. Alice, you say, do you have something against my Cora? Is it a harsh dark skin? I'm a Cora's mother, my first wife. While I was fighting for the king in far-off lands, great-grandparents came from Africa. Do you find that so ugly? No, sir, replied Hayward. It is only that Alice's smiling eyes and happy laugh captured my heart first. When Cora's mother died, I returned to Scotland. Alice is the fair daughter of my second wife, who died when she was born, went on Moron to himself, his face full of sadness. Then he became calm and businesslike. Now let us talk of the scout, Hawkeye. He was returning from Fort Edward, but the French have taken him prisoner. And Webb's reinforcement coming? Asked Hayward. I have no word from Hawkeye of that, answered Monroe, but he was bringing a letter from Webb, which I'm sure explained everything. The Montcalm has it now, of course, but if it brings bad news for us, why does Montcalm not tell us? Is that why he asked me to go and talk with him? What will you do, sir? The fort walls cannot stand much longer against a siege, and many of our guns are useless. I won't leave this fort while there is hope of help from Webb. Let us meet Montcalm and find out what we can. Some time later, Monroe and Hayward marched out of the fort at the head of their men to meet the French commander. Both sides stopped and stared for several minutes. Like what was there among Montcalm's men? So you come to talk of peace? Began Montcalm. My scouts tell me that you cannot hold the fort much longer. The time to be brave has passed. Think of the safety of your men now. Have your scouts not also seen General Webb's reinforcement, which are on their way to us? Let General Webb himself explain things, replied Montcalm, and he brought out an open letter from his pocket and put it into Monroe's hand. Monroe read it, and his face went gray. So it is impossible for me to send even one man to you. The best thing for you to do is to leave Fort William as quickly as possible. Yours, Webb. It's Webb's writing, said Hayward, reading it. It must be the captured letter. We won't leave. We'll fight to the death, said Monroe. Wait, interrupted Montcalm. The King of France is fair. You're brave, but there is no need to die. You can leave the fort with your men, women and children, your flags and guns. My army will let you go. I accept what you offer, said Mano, and he turned to Hayward. It's strange to find an English coward and an honest Frenchman in one day. The next day, 3,000 British left Fort William Henry with Monroe at the head of the line, a broken man. Hayward asked David Camus, the singing teacher, to ride with Cora and Alice at the back of the line, with the other British women and children from the fort. On one side of them stood the French army, on the other the Hurons watched and waited. When the British army had crossed the open ground in front of the fort and entered the fortress, the Hurons came near the women and children. Magua was with them. Suddenly one of the Hurons took hold of a baby and pulled it from its mother's arms. She screamed and tried to get a child back, but he threw the baby to the ground and pulled out his tomahawk to attack and kill the mother. This was how it began, the terrible massacre of the British women and children by the Hurons that day. The French did nothing to stop it. David Camus bravely sang hymns to stop the Indians attacking him. The Monna sisters and suddenly Monna appeared before them. Magua appeared. Come and be my wife, he called to Cora, and Alice fainted. Never, cried Cora. Clever Magua then picked up Alice's body and ran with her toward the forest. Cora followed. Kemet came after her, still singing his hymns. The Hurons thought he was crazy and let him walk past freely. At the forest's edge, Magua took the sisters to two horses. He pushed Alice over the back of one, and Cora got up with her. He led the horse into the forest. Kemet, who wasn't far behind, got on the second horse and rode after them. Chapter 6. Tracks from the Battlefield. Three days after the terrible massacre at Fort William Henry, about an hour before the sun went down, 5 figures crossed the empty battleground, now silent and still. The two in front, Uncas and Chingachgook, looked all around them as they moved forward. They were followed by Hawkeye, Hayward, and Monroe. These last two had taken off their British Army uniforms and heavy boots. They were now dressed in the soft leather jackets and trousers and the moccasins of scouts. It was a dangerous business which they had in front of them, following the French army as it marched north. Fort William Henry was now with nothing but the black smoking ruin. The French had not wished to capture and keep it, only to destroy it after taking it. They hoped in this way to stop the British from using the fort in the future as a useful place from which to push northwards into Canada. Slowly the five figures moved across the green battlefield, looking at the many lifeless bodies of women and children that still lay where they had fallen. They were searching for Cora and Alice, but they did not find them amongst the dead. Then Uncas found something caught on the branch of a tree. It was a small piece of green scarf, just like the one Cora usually wore. Hayward and Monroe went over to look. "Oh, many thanks, my friends," cried Monroe. "My daughters left the battle alive then, but where have they gone in since?" Chingachgook followed some tracks, which led into a forest, and the others came after him. Suddenly he pointed down at something. There was a moccasin shape in the soft ground. Hayward came nearer and looked where Chingachgook was pointing. "So they were prisoners," he said. Uncas now got on his hands and knees and looked closely at the shape in the soft ground. "Indians can read moccasin tracks better than white men." "Well, boy," asked Hawkeye, "whose eye is it?" Uncas looked up. "Magua," he said, and Chingachgook agreed. "So Magua took Cora this way," added Hawkeye. "But not Alice?" asked Hayward. "They found Gamut's hymn book on the ground, so the good man went with them too," said Hayward. A little way into the forest they saw the tracks of the horses, and at last they found something to tell them that Alice too had passed that way. One of her earrings. Hayward picked it up quietly and put it in his pocket, and Mona cried, thinking of his two daughters in Magua's hand. Because Mona was so weak with worry, the 5 stayed at dabbling in the ruins of the fort. After a light supper of dry bear meat, Mona went to sleep immediately, but Hayward and the others stayed awake to guard the place. In the middle of the night, they heard something moving amongst the dead bodies on the battlefield. "Wolves, perhaps looking for food," said Hayward. Not so sure of that, said Hawkeye, and he called Uncas to him. Two men talked briefly together, and then Uncas took a rifle and crawled off. Chingachgook sat calmly by the fire. You couldn't tell that he believed there were Hurons out on the battlefield. Then there was a rifle shot, and the old Mohican threw himself to the ground. The bullet missed him by inches and hit the wall of the fort just behind him. Then there was another shot out on the battlefield. Soon after that, Uncas returned. Hurons? asked Hawkeye. One, replied Uncas, the lifting up one finger as he spoke. Chingachgook, Uncas, and Hawkeye now sat in a circle near the fire. They lit a pipe and smoked as they spoke of what to do the next day. Hayward watched them with interest. At first, Uncas and Chingachgook wanted to follow Magua and his prisoners on foot, but after a lot of talking and smoking, Hawkeye persuaded them to travel by canoe after the lake. After an hour, they finished their conversation and lay down to sleep. Hayward was not long in following their examples. The stars were still in the sky when the Hawkeye woke them early the next morning. Hayward and Mono followed him down to the lake and got into the canoe. Uncas and Chingachgook were already there, ready to paddle away. Hawkeye got in last, and they left, steering across the beautiful waters of the lake. As the sun came up, they found themselves at the narrow part of the lake, with lots of small inlands in their path. This was the path that Montcalm had taken to return to the north. Perhaps he had left some of his men behind to guard his back, so Uncas and Chingachgook paddled forward slowly, careful of possible danger. As they got near to one small island, Chingachgook pointed. There was gray smoke above the trees. Someone's lit a fire, said Hawkeye. But there can't be many of them. Then let us attack, said Hayward, but he spoke a little too loudly. Suddenly there came a rifle shot from the island, and two canoes pushed into the water. Each full of Huron fighter. Chingachgook and Uncas paddled off faster than the wind between two other rocky islands. Then Hawkeye gave his paddle to Hayward and then picked up his rifle from the bottom of the canoe. Start paddling, Hayward, he shouted, while I see if my rifle till deer can reach them. As their canoe flew across the lake, Hawkeye lifted his rifle to his eye to shoot at the leader of the Hurons in the canoe that was following them. But a cry from Uncas stopped him. Looking forward, the scout at once saw why he had cried out. A third Huron canoe had come from one of the islands in front of him and was cutting across their path. Uncas and Chingachgook steered the boat quickly around the long, low island, and the canoe in front had to slow down in order to steer along the other side of the island. Hawkeye lifted his rifle again and shot at the Huron in the front of the canoe, who fell back dying. As the Hurons did not have rifles that could reach as far as Kildare, and as none of them could paddle as fast as the two Mohicans, they gave up the chase. Some time later, Hawkeye, the Mohicans, Hayward, and Mono landed at the edge of the lake, hid the canoe carefully under some bushes, picked up their bags and their guns, walked off into the forest. The end.